What up, everybody? I'm currently in the process of converting a 2003 GMC Savana, and I was at a crossroads where I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my electrical system. Initially, I was thinking of really just going the easy route and doing a portable power station like a Jackery or similar. But ultimately I decided to build my own system. It was for a variety of different reasons. Number one being cost, two was modularity, and then three really was just because I wanted to learn. I think it's been something that's super fulfilling, and I am really glad I ended up doing it just because I learned a lot. And I feel a lot more confident in my abilities to hopefully teach it to some other people. I need to preface this by saying I'm not an expert by any means. It's not something that's super easy. However, it is very, very fulfilling. You'll learn quite a lot about electricity and then just about like your capabilities. If this can be a video that will inspire you to do that and know that you are capable of doing it, I think anyone is capable as long as you have like the proper resources and you've done your research. Yeah, you can really do anything. I first want to state that this is a 12-volt system that is a 200 amp hour battery. It has 400 watts of solar panels on the roof, and it is also capable of doing alternator charging. So it's fairly capacitive. For my needs, I really don't need that much, but I think it's smart to get something that is at a higher capacity than what you think you might need. You might find down the line that you actually need more than what you have. The benefits to doing something that is modular is that you can just plug and play. Like once you figure out your capacity needs, you can always upgrade it. Whereas with a portable power station, you're kind of locked into something. So I kind of want to just take the time to go through the components on a very high level. I'm not going to dig super deep. However, if someone wanted me to go into something deeper, I'd be happy to either reach out to you via email, Instagram, or who knows, maybe make another video if this thing is successful. But yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead and start getting into it. Again, keeping it pretty high level. Alright, number one, I'm gonna start with the battery selection. So this is a SOK 12 volt 206 amp hour battery. The reason I chose this one, specifically the debate of lithium phosphate over lead acid, I don't want to go super into detail about that because there are plenty of videos that explain it far better than I could. However, I just wanted something that I wouldn't have to worry about. I don't really know where I'm going to be taking this thing, so if I am in an instance where, I don't have access to recharging, then I wanted something that was capacitive enough to just allow me to not really have to worry about discharging it below a certain capacity. The reason I chose this one particularly, and why I chose it from the website that I did, which was currentconnected.com, is because this one happens to offer a 7-year manufacturer warranty and then a 3-year extended warranty from currentconnected.com. So in total you're getting 10 years of warranty for a battery, and I thought that was pretty amazing. So moving on, this right here is a 100 amp MRBF fuse. Again, there's a lot of other videos that describe it a little bit better, but I chose an MRBF fuse because it provides like the best current protection for something like a battery. Moving on from here, I have a 300 amp Blue Sea Systems switch. So the reason I wanted to have a switch right directly tied to my battery is so that if I'm ever at a time where I'm not needing to use this system, I can just turn it off. There's certain loads that are involved in the system that might have some idle draw, so if I don't have to keep it on, I don't need to, and I don't have to be consuming the battery at all. Another reason is just for protection. It's good to be able to have a on and off switch if something goes wrong. Okay, so additionally coming directly from my battery is this shunt. This is by Renogy. I believe it is a 300 amp shunt. Basically what it does is just allows me to have a monitoring of my battery, much like a built-in BMS. It's just a second setup really, and it allows me to know what my state of charge is as well as what the consumptions are of my loads. So as an example, I'm going to turn on the full power to my system just by doing this right here. Cool, so doing that, it automatically turned on these LEDs that I wired up, and that chirp noise was just from this fan that I have installed. So if I move over here, this will be cleaned up as I continue my build. But as you can see right there, I have a state of charge of 45% because it's a 200 amp hour battery. It says I have 90 amp hours. Right here it lets me know what my voltage is at, what the current consumption is. You'll notice that it's negative, so that means it's consuming. If I were to turn on a charging source like my solar or my alternator charging, it would be positive. And then right here it just lets me know how many watts are being consumed by these LEDs and by whatever other idle loads that are currently connected to the system. So I'm going to turn it back off and then move up to the next piece that is right here. So this is my positive bus bar. What a bus bar basically just does is takes all the inputs and then distributes them out to the other circuits that are involved in an entire system. So I have one that is involved with all my positives and then one that's involved with all my negatives. These were purchased from Current Connected. They're both 300 amp ratings on the studs, and then they have just little screws involved too. So if I had smaller loads, I could connect those to that. Immediately following my bus bar, I have all the different fuses that I send to my various components. So these are all ANL fuses, and they are fused accordingly to the amperage that gets output from the different component. So for instance, at the first one right here, I've got a 700 watt inverter. What an inverter does is basically converts your DC 12 volt power and then amplifies it so that it is 120 volts, and you deal with typical household outlets. When I had to go through the process of finding the proper fuse for that, I took 700, divided it by 12, multiplied it by 1.25. It's a coefficient that you typically want to use when fusing. Plenty of information about that on the internet. But I took that and then basically got between 70 and 80, so I went up to 80 amps. So that's what that fuse is for. And basically the same calculation gets done for all the other components. Back to the inverter, the reason I chose a 700 watt inverter over something larger was really just because I wanted most of my power consumption to be done at the 12 volt level, just because it's a little bit cleaner. It was honestly just recommended to me. Basically use 12 volt as much as you can. There's no need for any transformation like there is for 120 volt. Also, if you don't have a huge inverter, then you don't really need huge cables. So that's kind of ultimately why I chose that. Also, I don't really think there's going to be a lot of loads that I need to use that are 120 volt AC related. But yeah, it's a Renogy 700 watt inverter. It's a pure sine wave inverter. Alright, moving on down the line, this is my Renogy 50 amp DC to DC onboard battery charger with MPPT. Yep, quite the mouthful, but I'll explain briefly what it does. Basically, I've got inputs that are solar power, so this is my negative solar power, this is my positive solar power lines. Those go through the roof, and then they connect to my solar panels. So the solar panels come in through here, and because they don't always produce the same level of voltage, it needs to go into something that will clean it up. So that's what this is. An MPPT does that for the consumer. It takes the power from the solar panel, the PV photovoltaic power, and then it transfers it into something that's clean enough to be sent back to the battery. What I have here is another one of those 300 amp Blue Sea System switch. The reason I put one of these in here is so that I have the option of turning off my solar panels and using the other feature of this, which is to use an alternator charging. So I'll go into that real quick. Like I said, this is a DC-DC onboard battery charger. What that means is that it takes power from my engine's battery, and then puts it into here, does the cleanup process, and then sends it to my battery. So basically what that means for me is that I have an option to either charge via alternator or via solar panels. So the reason I wanted to have a switch here as well as a switch here is because how it's designed in this is that it'll take 25 from the alternator and then 25 from the solar panels. But say I'm in an instance where it's, you know, cloudy out, I'm not really seeing a lot of sun, but I'm doing a lot of driving, I would want to turn this one on completely so that I can basically bypass this and take 50 amps from my alternator. It's important to note, just make sure that whatever alternator you're choosing or whatever you're dealing with is capable of pulling 50 amps. I've got a heavy duty one on mine. I think it's 145 amps or so. So it should be more than capable of, you know, giving me 50 amps. On the flip side, if I am parked for a long time and I'm getting a lot of sunshine, I would want to turn this on completely so that I have the option of pulling 50 amps from my solar panel and using that as the sole source. It's important to note though that I'm only using 400 watts of solar panels, so the maximum amount of amps that I could ever pull from the solar panels at any given time would be around 33 amps. Alright, so coming right over here, you can see that I am currently pulling close to 300 watts of strictly solar panel. However, this MPPT has the functionality to allow me to use alternator charging. So I'll demonstrate that for you. So I've installed a switch right here. If I turn that on, and I go over to the van, ignition, start it up. Notice, it takes a second, but right here, this is gonna flash a little bit, this icon. There you go. It's sending me that there's a signal there. It's detecting that the alternator is now on. So instead of just pulling about 20 or so watts from the solar panels, I'm now pulling 45 watts in total from the alternator and from the solar power, those two combined. Moving on to, I guess, the last thing here. This is my 12 volt fuse panel. It's dealing with the 12 volt accessories. So again, I'm dealing with my LEDs, my fan, and then I have all these cigarette lighters that are also going to be utilized at some point. One of them I'm going to be using for just my 12 volt fridge, and these ones could be used for my phone or, you know, whatever else I want to plug in. But yeah, that kind of covers it for the different components that are on here. I think the one last thing that I really want to cover and explain are the wire choices. So number one, what type of wire am I using? So this is a stranded pure copper marine grade wire. Important to use marine grade as it's like very flexible. You want to make sure whatever you use is very flexible because, you know, you're working in tight space and there's some wires out there that are extremely stiff and you'll notice that it's not ideal at all. Also making sure that it's stranded, because you're going to be in a vehicle. If you're going to be implementing this in a vehicle, you're going to have to deal with a lot of different vibrations that are, you know, various magnitudes. So you need something that is able to withstand that. It won't harm the wire itself. Okay, so then going into how you figure out the sizing of the wire, it's really dependent on the load. So right here, this is, again, my 100 amp 12 volt DC fuse panel. Because it's 100 amps, this actually turns out to be the highest level of amperage that I deal with in my system. So when I went to decide my wire, I basically decided it based off of this component. And because I had a lot of different components that were kind of similarly rated in terms of amperage, I ended up just using this wire everywhere that I could. I purchased 25 feet of it. Just know that when you're purchasing wire, it's going to be expensive. The more that you can use your wire throughout, the better. It's okay to use wire that's thicker than what it is, you know, rated for, whatever that component is rated for, but you never want to go on the other side of it. You'll always want to veer on the side of it, you know, being thicker, because it can carry more amperage. Okay, I think lastly is kind of covering price. It's important to say that like something like this is not cheap. You're not going to be doing this for a couple $100. In fact, this was close to $2,500. I'm going to include all the different products that I used, as well as the cost for all of them. So this was, again, around like $2,500. Off the top of my memory, if I can go through each of them and describe the price, this one was listed for $1,000, which is actually relatively cheap for a 200 amp hour one. A lot of times I've seen these like a Battleborn battery, which are what I've heard really great things. They're great batteries, but it was listed for $1,000 for a 100 amp hour battery. So if you can, you know, find ways to get reputable batteries from reputable sources for a little bit cheaper, why not go with it? So that's why I went with this one. With shipping, and because I purchased it from currentconnected.com, it was a little bit more than that. I think I paid $1,064. For these switches that you saw throughout, got 3 of them. I got super lucky on these. They were listed on Amazon for, I believe, $26. And then I went to Walmart one day and saw that they were listed for like 22 or something, or 21 on clearance, and I was like, shoot, I'll buy some different ones. I initially only purchased 2, but I was like, well, I might as well just get 3 because I might, you know, need to use a different one somewhere. But when I went to go ring it up, it came up to $9. So I purchased 3, so those were only 27. Rare occurrence, I don't think you could find that elsewhere, but yeah, I got really lucky with that. This terminal mounted fuse, I believe, was around $50. This was around $130. Relatively cheap for an inverter. I initially had a 2,000 watt inverter that was a bit more, so it was nice to get some money back. For the alternator charger / MPPT, I believe it was around $230. For these ones, as I stated, they were about $55 all in for the 2 of them, and that was with shipping and with taxes included. This was, I believe, around $50 as well. The shunt, I think the shunt was also around $50, and then these were probably around like 10 to 15 each. So the battery is really like the big one for it, and then, you know, whatever components you buy are other factors. Really the last thing I have to do with this electrical system before I can really like cap it off is really just to put in the diesel heater, and then once I do that, I'll be ready to close it off and it should be good from there. So I'm excited. If this was a useful video to you, if you were able to learn anything, Reach out if you'd like any clarification on something. If you find that I said something wrong, also mention that below. I don't want to be spreading information that isn't true, as electricity is dangerous and I don't want anyone to get hurt. If you'd like to follow along my build journey, I've been posting on my Instagram anytime I make an update, so you can follow me. It's at Shrek Queen. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.